Ever watch a room full of powerful people mistake silence for weakness? Right up until the moment the person they're humiliating turns the whole thing into a case study that ruins them? Give me a minute, because this starts as a joke haircut and ends as a full system failure for the people who thought they were untouchable. Stop cutting my hair right now. Janet Stone's voice detonates through the Meridian restaurant's private dining room like a breaker snapping under overload. 12 wealthy women freeze mid-laugh, champagne glasses suspended in polished fingers. The whole room locked in the stunned quiet that follows a sudden shock. Elizabeth Jones stands over Janet with styling shears, catching the light, cold and gleaming. Small chunks of Janet's hair scattered across the Italian marble like debris after a careless demolition. For half a second, the outburst feels dangerous, like a line has finally been crossed in a way the room can't laugh away. And then Elizabeth's mouth curls back into that sharp, predatory smile. Oh, sweetie, she purrs, voice honeyed and cruel all at once. We're just getting started. What Elizabeth doesn't understand, what none of them understand, is that this isn't a helpless waitress losing control. This is a woman 3 months from graduating top of her law school class, standing inside a live example of the exact statutes she has been studying for years. 24 hours earlier, Janet's phone buzzed in her apron pocket as she reset tables after lunch service. Student loan payment due in 24 hours. $2,400. The number landed in her gut the way a bad test result lands when you already know the system is at its limit. She'd done the math 1,000 times: tuition, rent, groceries, the emergency fund that never existed, the constant balancing of bills against hours worked. Lose this job and the chain reaction hits everything. No school payment, no enrollment, no degree, no shot at the life she'd been engineering one shift at a time. Morning coffee shop shift, dragged herself across town to classes, and come back for the dinner shift at Meridian running on 4 hours of sleep and willpower so old it felt structural. Then the accident happened. A tray slightly unstable, her wrist tired from a 14-hour day, red Cabernet sliding out and blooming across Elizabeth's cream silk blouse. Janet had apologized, instantly mortified, offering dry cleaning money she didn't have. Elizabeth's first reaction was normal annoyance, which might have ended the story right there. But the mood shifted the moment her friends started circling the mess like engineers, spotting a failure they can exploit. "Oh my gosh," Camilla Sterling said, setting her crystal glass down with surgical precision. "That's really so damaged." She studied Janet's face the way people with power sometimes examine someone they don't see as fully real. You know, split ends are really unprofessional for someone serving food. The word unprofessional landed with a soft click, like a lock engaging. The other women nodded, repeating it as if they'd found a shared justification for cruelty. Professional Grace Peaton echoed, "House standards. It's about appearance." The room performed its own little moral math. If they could wrap humiliation in help, then it wasn't humiliation. Janet stood there, chin tucked slightly, eyes down the way service workers are trained to diffuse customers. But inside her brain was already doing what it always did under pressure, switching to analysis. She knew employment law. She knew harassment doctrine. She knew that customer conduct becomes employer liability the moment management allows it to continue. She also knew she was outnumbered, in a room where people like Elizabeth formed their own weather. When Elizabeth took the shears from her purse, it was so casual it felt surreal. "Hold still," she said brightly as if offering a favor. The first cut took 2 inches off the back. A second cut, a third hair fell on too. Marble in dark, soft clumps. The women laughed and clapped like this was reality TV and not a federal violation playing out in front of witnesses. "There," Elizabeth announced, stepping back, admiring her work on Janet like she just corrected a crooked painting. "So much better, don't you think, ladies?" The chorus of approval washed over the room. "Yes, much cleaner, way more professional." While Janet remained perfectly still, she wasn't calculating her humiliation. She was calculating her strategy. Because in her apron pocket, her other hand had already clicked record. 16 minutes of audio captured every laugh, every lesson, the intent, the coordination, the way the group reinforced each other into a mob that felt righteous. In the kitchen doorway, manager Ethan Cole watched with the strained pallor of someone trapped between policy and conscience. His phone buzzed with a text from regional management. "Customer satisfaction is our absolute priority. Handle accordingly." Corporate language loaded like a threat. Ethan knew Janet's situation, knew she worked multiple jobs, knew she never complained, knew she was headed somewhere bigger than this dining room. But he also knew he could lose his job for pushing back on a high-spend regular like Elizabeth. The champagne kept flowing. Tomorrow we should do a proper cut, Grace said, scrolling through harsh, severe haircuts on her phone, holding up the screen as if presenting options in a design review. Something like this. Clean lines. More appropriate for service work. The word appropriate got passed around like a tool. After they left, she swept up her own hair, while the women's laughter echoed down the hall. Maintenance staff avoided eye contact in that way people do when they're forced to witness humiliation and pretend it's normal. But Janet wasn't erasing evidence, she was preserving it. She stood alone in the private room, marble floor glittering under chandeliers, and watched her reflection in the mirror. Hair, exactly as Elizabeth intended. A worker put in her place. But reflections lie. The person in that mirror had spent 3 years studying how the law protects workers from exactly this kind of abuse. Tomorrow, when Elizabeth returned with buzzing clippers and a bigger audience, she would be walking into a trap built from her own arrogance. The next evening came like a sequel nobody should have been allowed to film. Elizabeth arrived with 15 friends, laughter loud and hungry. The clippers sat on a linen tablecloth beside champagne flutes, their cords snaking across white fabric like a mechanical thread. Other diners were already whispering, some openly recording on their phones, drawn by the grotesque spectacle word of mouth had promised them. Elizabeth turned the clippers on. Their buzz cut through the dining room conversation in a way that made the whole place feel smaller. Part 2 of yesterday's makeover, she announced, voice theatrical. Janet needs a proper haircut, don't you, sweetie? Janet approached from the service station, shoulders squared. She'd spent the last 24 hours reviewing precedent, backing up recordings, and timing this moment. The recording device in her apron pocket captured the eager faces around the table. Every witness to what was about to become a landmark complaint. Camilla retold yesterday like a war story, exaggerating her own benevolence. She looked so much better afterward, she laughed. Sometimes these people need guidance. Grace produced a handwritten betting sheet with odds on haircut styles and completion times. Winner takes all. Proceeds go to charity, she said, letting the word charity launder the cruelty into virtue. The first pass of clippers left Janet's scalp visible in sharp, uneven patches. Elizabeth worked with focused enthusiasm, not aiming for neatness, but degradation. Shorter there, Camilla suggested, pointing. Make it even, but even wasn't the goal. The goal was to break her passing card. Janet didn't flinch. She tracked faces, logged comments, noted timing. Across the room, Ethan's voice came over staff earpieces, tight and formal. Mrs. Jones, let us know if you need anything further. He didn't step in. Corporate policy spoke for him. Elizabeth never paused. Customer satisfaction is your priority, isn't it? She asked loudly, reminding everyone who she believed owned the room. Comments grew bolder. She's finally up to house standards. Consider it compliance training. All service workers should be guided like this. Their repetition created a chorus systematic, coordinated, and incredibly helpful to a future plaintiff. When Elizabeth finally set the clippers down, Janet's reflection showed patchwork scalp and uneven tufts, a deliberate masterpiece of humiliation. Now sweep up your hair, Elizabeth commanded. Janet knelt on the marble, gathering strands while phones recorded her in silence broken by whispers. Get a close-up of her face, someone said. She needs to remember this lesson. Lesson, lesson, lesson. Every time they said it, they admitted intent. Janet moved methodically, strand by strand, turning her humiliation into an evidence trail. Staff watched from doorways, faces tight with helplessness, a few discreetly filming because they sensed the gravity of what they were seeing. When the last strand was swept, Ethan cleared his throat. I'm sorry, Janet, he said, words clearly pulled from a handbook. You're suspended pending investigation. Gasps rose from diners. Elizabeth's table erupted in satisfied laughter. Exactly right, Grace said. Actions have consequences. At home in her studio apartment, she uploaded every recording to encrypted storage with timestamps, the way law students learn to handle sensitive evidence. Her textbooks were stacked everywhere. Constitutional law, civil procedure, employment rights, not props now, but tools. Her apartment told a story of grit, a Murphy bed milk crate shelves, made from a door on sawhorses, acceptance letters taped beside the window like engineering specs for the life she was building. At 9:30 a.m., Elizabeth called, voice bright with the confidence of someone who thinks she won. Janet, darling, don't be upset. It was for your own good. You learned an important lesson about appropriate appearance in service. Don't you agree? Janet put it on speaker, typing calmly. Mrs. Jones, she said, voice steady and precise. What you did was illegal. Silence. Then nervous laughter. Illegal? Sweetie, don't be dramatic. It was just a haircut. Just, Janet repeated softly, filing the word where it belonged. It is illegal to harass an employee because of race. It's illegal to create a hostile work environment. It's illegal for an employer to allow customer harassment, and it's illegal to retaliate against a worker after she's been victimized. The legal terms came out of her mouth clean and fluent, not as threats, but as facts. Elizabeth's confidence cracked. Law school, but you're just a waitress. I'm a law student graduating in 3 months, Janet replied, and I've spent 2 years studying the exact laws you violated. Some of us work multiple jobs because debt doesn't care about intelligence. Some of us know our rights, and we know what you can't do. Elizabeth started backpedaling. Good intentions, misunderstandings. Trying to help, each excuse digging a deeper hole. Janet explained impact over intent, hostile environment standards, employer liability, the EEOC process, evidence preservation. She didn't yell. She educated. In the middle of that call, power shifted. The predator realized she'd mistaken a trained professional for prey. When the call ended, Janet opened a document titled Complaint to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and began to type. By noon, she and her law school friend Sarah had packaged the evidence into a clear, clinical public explainer, no melodrama, just timestamps, transcripts, and plain English law. Within hours, the story cracked open across social media and legal networks. Professionals amplified it because the documentation was airtight. Workers shared it because they recognized themselves. Advocacy groups boosted it because it was a textbook case. The restaurant chain couldn't contain the fallout. Elizabeth couldn't scrub the recordings. Ethan couldn't hide behind policy. What had been a private entertainment became a public education, and a single woman's humiliation became a blueprint that forced an industry to confront the cost of prioritizing wealthy customers over human dignity. And in the center of it all was Janet Stone, exhausted, determined, hair uneven by someone else's cruelty, but mind sharp enough to turn that cruelty into consequences. Because the thing Elizabeth never understood is the thing engineers and lawyers both know. When you push a system past its limits, it doesn't just bend, it trips. And sometimes the person you try to break is exactly the person who knows how to make the whole structure come down safely, legally, and for good.